Okay. Good morning, everybody. I think I recognize everybody. I even recognize Jenny. I think this may be Jenny's second meeting. I think she's another Austin person. Um, so I'm Michelle, and I think everybody knows that. And I'm facilitating this morning. So for my second time, so bear with me. I'm still getting used to this role. So I will start out with the slogan that we always start out with of Erace, which is Racism is the slogan of the group Erace, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person-to-person communication to show that we are committed to treating fellow human beings of all colors with love and respect. Please join us. And so, as I said, I'm Michelle. I'm facilitating. I'm in Austin. I've been coming to Erace since the summer of 2020. Louise introduced me. And as I said, I'm in Austin. So I was going to go around and we'll introduce ourselves just briefly. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been coming, if you want to say where you are, whatever else. And I'm going to go in order of what's on my screen here, and I'm going to start with, hopefully, Glenn. That's Glenn with a G.
Yeah, Glenn, been coming to Erace since 1994, and I try to keep it lively. Uh, that's my comment.
Thank you. Good morning. Next, I've got on my screen Phyllis.
Morning, everybody. I'm Phyllis. I've been coming to Erace since 2008, and I am very much looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Nancy.
Good morning. I've been coming to Erace since June of 2007. Always glad to be here.
Nice to have you as well. Marion.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Marion. I live in New Orleans. I have been participating in the Erace discussion since 1993. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Marion. And whoops, now everything's switched. It's Marva.
Good morning, everyone. I've been coming to Erace post-Katrina, and I look forward to each Saturday. I learned something different and new in each discussion. I'm glad to be here participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. Bill, and we're missing Cindy this morning.
Cindy will be here.
Okay, good.
Yes, no, she'll be here. I'm Bill Ives, and I am married to Cindy Morse, who will be here shortly. And we've been coming for 4 or 5 years now. I learn something new every time. And Glenn does keep the conversation lively, and I greatly value his input. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Pedro.
Hey, thanks for facilitating this meeting today, Michelle. I'm in Austin and been coming to Erace. Well, I'm into my second year and find it extremely provocative and appreciate everyone's inputs. Thank you.
Thanks, Pedro. Jenny.
Hey, I'm in Austin where the wind is so fierce. I was going to run out and see if my Eracism bumper sticker magnet is still on my car, but it's too cold and windy to go. This is my maybe third meeting, so I'm definitely a newbie.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for coming today. Marla.
Hey, good morning. My name's Marla. I have been coming to Erace meetings for, I guess, about a year. I'll probably be saying that in like another however many years. I'll say it's only been a year. But anyway, I'm in the New Orleans area also. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Good to see everybody.
Thanks, Marla. Nora?
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I've been coming just this past year, and I'm in Austin, and it's just a nice way to start the weekend. And hi, Jenny. Glad to see you. And that's it.
Thanks, Nora. Louise?
I'm Louise, and I have been coming for over 2 decades, off and on. Was beginning in New Orleans, and then Katrina kicked me out over here in Austin, Texas. But so glad that you do Zoom meetings, because I love these meetings. And yes, this topic is great, Michelle. This should be a good discussion.
Richard? Are you muted? I think you're
Can you
muted.
hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's Richard in New Orleans. I've been with Erace since the beginning. And unfortunately, there is another Zoom meeting at 11 o'clock this morning. The Progressive Kids Center Community Breakfast is having their meeting. So I may be cutting out early, but definitely wanted to be involved with this discussion.
Thanks, Richard. Lynn, with an L.
Good morning. I'm Lynn Frank from New Orleans. I joined in the summer of 2019, and I'm happy to see everyone. I'm happy to have gotten to know you over these months. It's a wonderful group of people. Thank you.
Cheryl.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I think I am going into my second consistent year of off and on weekend meetings. And I've been with the Erace since I think 2004 was when I was introduced. And I am in part of another group that's working, and the subject just came up with them, an article that was in the New York Times, I believe. So I really appreciate this discussion today. Thank you, Michelle, for picking this subject.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Good morning, everybody. I'm from Boston. It seems like an awfully long way away to be joining this discussion, but I think it's a special group of people and a very special discussion. And yeah, I become aware of how things work. I become aware of something new every time. So thank you. Thank you very much for including me.
Thank you, Rebecca. Cindy, thanks. Don't forget to, you're on.
Sorry to be late. The recycle people didn't pick up yesterday, and I called the company and they said, we'll send someone right out. So I had to go move the cans again. So sorry to be late. I'm Cindy Morse. Been in New Orleans a long time, but not native, though 50 years makes me almost native. I value Erace, the meetings and the people very much. Thank you for being here. And I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Cindy. And Greer.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Greer. I've been coming to Erace since 2008, and I enjoy everyone's comment, and it gives me food for thought for the week to come.
Thanks, Greer. And I think that's all that we have here in the meeting. I'm going to go over the just the general guidelines of how we run the meetings for everybody, just to once again get that in our minds. If you could, when you're not speaking, remain on mute. And if we can't hear you, of course we'll let you know that, so we can correct that if necessary. But if you could remain on mute, and not not as important as Phyllis pointed out, but if you could keep your phones on silent so that in case you're on
Mhm.
speaker, that interruption isn't in the background, or any televisions or things like that that are in the background of where you are. That would be considerate and helpful. And then in order to get on the list to talk, you raise the one finger, and if you could kind of just move it around to make sure, because with the Zoom stuff, sometimes you go in and out of focus and stuff, so it's helpful if you move it around. One finger to get on the list to talk, and two fingers means that you'd like to make a clarifying or ask a clarifying question of the previous speaker. And we allow 2 clarifying questions per speaker each time, and those questions need to be questions. They can't be like a way to restate something that you wanted to make a point about or to start a back and forth with that person. It's really like, can you please clarify what you meant by that statement you made, or can you, whatever the clarifying question you would like to ask, it does need to be in the form of a question. And then let's see. We will speak. I'm going to keep a list, and speakers will go in the order of the list that I keep. So I will, remind from time to time who's on the list in case you're wondering if you were seen. I'll try and make a little point when I see your finger, but I try not to interrupt we try not to interrupt the speakers at the time. But if you've got a finger up during that time, I kind of might just say your name just to identify that I've seen your finger and want to be on the list. And please we don't interrupt the speakers. There's no side comments, no personal attacks, no name calling, because the point of this discussion is to listen, learn, and not to argue. And then we will speak until about 11:15, which is when our cutoff time and we'll switch to final wrap-up commentary, which anybody who has spoken will get 1 minute at the end of that time. And then if you've not spoken, I keep a list of those people as best I possibly can. And you will have 2 minutes to be able to make commentary at the end of the time of the meeting.
Michelle, you might want to start the wrap up before 11:15. There's 18 people on this.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, maybe we'll probably stop about like 11, I guess maybe 11:05 or 11:10.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. And I think that's it. And then at the end, if we've got time, we'll make announcements, I guess, is the last thing. So, and should I say why I brought the topic now? Is that,
yes.
I can't remember the order. Sorry.
Yes,
I'm
you should.
looking at the list. Okay. Yes. So, yeah, I came across this article a while back and have been debated back and forth whether or not I wanted to bring this as a topic, because obviously it's kind of one of those things where I count on my screen here 3 white men. And so, we're in a discussion group here where everything about race and everything is kind of on the table. So that made it feel safe to me, so to speak. I'm a white woman, obviously. I've got things to say about it. And it's not a point to put anybody on the spot, because I think that's kind of how it can feel. But I think it's an important topic to discuss because it is very integral to where we are today, as far as race relations in this country and racism, and what drives it. So, and I came across the article, and the fact it was kind of coincidence that it happened to be a man who is a professor emeritus at the University of Texas here in Austin. And I will add as well that my colleague and co-host for the program I co-host on civil rights and wrongs on Co-op Radio here in Austin actually knows this man. And there's backstory to that I won't bring into this discussion. But nonetheless, the fact that he identifies as a quote-unquote feminist is also an interesting point of conversation as well. So I thought the article had a lot to say that things that I've thought about before and things that certainly I had not thought about. I also have read the book by the author that he reviews in this article, Ijeoma Oluo, and I really enjoyed her book, the first book that she read. I have not read this book that he reviews in his article, but something that is on my list to be reading, and I hope to get to it soon. So there was just a lot to be discussed in this article, and I really thought it was one that would make an interesting discussion for our group here. So that's why I brought it, basically. So I guess with that, let me get my paper ready, and I will start taking down names of people who would like to be on the list. Nobody. Nancy. Anybody else at this point? Greer. Phyllis. Richard. Rebecca. Bill. Marion. And I think I've got everybody for now, correct? So I've got Nancy, Greer, Phyllis, Richard, Rebecca, Bill, and Marion. Okay. So I'm going to start the timer, and Nancy, you can go ahead and unmute.
I was talking and I was muted. Okay. No, for me, it's on the second page. There was a paragraph, and it says, if mediocre seems unkind, how about ordinary? I'm not special, but I live in a culture that designates people who look like me as the standard. A white supremacist and patriarchal society props up white guys, not because we're superior, but precisely because we're not. White guys need the unearned advantages to keep alive the fantasy that we deserve to be on top. And that fantasy is not harmless. Our embrace of dominance means subordinating people who don't look like us, which creates incentive for white men to remain clueless. And I find that not all people, but I do find that many people who are not subjected to the daily microaggressions and indignities of being a female or a person of color are totally clueless. If it doesn't happen to you and you don't seek it out, or you don't know somebody who that experiences this, it doesn't exist. Or they're just, like I listen to WWL a lot, and particularly you hear a lot of white men call up, oh, those people are always complaining about something. Well, yeah, it seems to like complaining to you because you're not experiencing it. It's not complaining. It's genuine. It happens. There are systematic processes and systems in place that keep people in the same place for this exact same reason, to keep one group down and to prop another group up. And to say that it doesn't exist, or you just need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and work harder, is very insensitive when you haven't experienced the experience yourself. Yes, Louise. You want to be on the list, or did you want to have a question? The list. Okay.
That's the time. In case you were wondering, because my phone went off in the middle of that. Sorry. Did you have Louise, you want to get on the list?
Yeah, she wants to be on the list. I thought she might have had a question.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nancy. The next on the list is Greer.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
It was so funny that this was the article. I laughed when I was reading it because friends of mine at work, we were talking yesterday about something like this. Glenn. And so I was like, I said, do y'all ever notice that the only place that we ever see, I mean, not the only place, but you notice we never see any white housekeepers where we work? And they say, yeah, you're right. We don't ever see any white housekeepers where we work. And I say, well, let me tell you a little secret. There are certain buildings in here that have only white housekeepers. And they were like, what? I say, yes. So in reading this article, it's like things are really done by design to keep, I guess, well, we all know it, but it's like they were like amazed. It's like you want to keep Black people visible where I work, who are doing like menial tasks. But those who are white, you put them elsewhere where nobody sees them. In these certain buildings that they're in, only employees work. No other people that we serve actually go into them. So one day I just happened to turn a corner. I was like, what? And I found them. That's it. This article, again, when I read this article, I was like, yeah, I see it in full effect.
Thanks, Greer. Let's see. Next on the list, and I got you, Glenn. I saw. Oh, Marion, did you have a clarifying question? Don't forget to unmute.
Thing there, I'm a little confused, Greer. Maybe everybody gets it, but I'm kind of in a fog, I guess, this morning. Is it because are the white keepers in a certain section of the hospital because they're being kept away from being insulted by white male staff members, or is there some other reason? Because it sort of went over my head as to why only the white housekeepers are kept in a certain part of the hospital.
To me, I can't say for sure, but if you have one group cloistered in certain places, and you have the other group where you see them everywhere you turn your head, to me, it's done by design. They are trying to protect white psyches. So if you see, when people are coming through and all you see is Black housekeepers and you're white, well, you're going to think that there's only Black housekeepers, because honestly, I had seen a white one in all the time that I had been working. But when it just so happened on a certain day, I went into 2 different buildings and I saw like a group of them, like it was a congregation. So I find that ironic that everywhere else I go, but it happened on certain days that in these 2 particular buildings, that's all you had. I didn't see anybody else who was of color working. It's done by design. That's too cloistered to even potentially be random. And I think it's on purpose. Yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Lynn has a clarifying question.
Lynn, don't forget to unmute.
Thank you. I think it's a shame that white housekeepers and Black housekeepers can't work together, get to know each other, and appreciate each other as human beings and people living the same kind of lives. Usually in the past, when people were kept separate, it was to prevent solidarity.
Sorry, Lynn, is this a question?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. My question is, could it have something to do with preventing solidarity among all the housekeepers?
Think about it. This is my opinion, so I can't say that part of it, but I don't think so. I really don't. If anything, you're creating more of a solidarity by keeping people who are alike together than if you're making a mix and mingle. Because even though we're thrown together, we still gravitate towards who we are comfortable with. So at the end of the day, it really doesn't make a difference. I think they don't want them seen. I think, again, to protect the white psyches.
Thanks, Greer. Thanks, Lynn. Let's see. Next on the list is Phyllis.
I would add not only to the housekeeping, but to the CNAs where I am also tend to be women of color. Housekeepers where I am are Black and Hispanic for the most part. And the CNAs kind of do a lot of hands-on cleaning up messes work. So, but I wanted to, I can't give you a page number for the article because I cut and pasted into a Word document. But there's a paragraph that starts, I can imagine some white men dismissing the book as identity politics. And then in the middle of that, it says, basically that if identity politics means that people in one group, and I believe he's referring to white men, can simply declare a correct interpretation of an issue and denounce those who disagree, that's a problem too. And I think there's a lot of, not again with all white men, but there is a lack of insight into their role, their culpability, their accountability, and they have a really hard time not, they have a hard time understanding that their opinion or belief in something is not the only way to look at something, and that their opinion and understanding of the world is vastly different from mainly the rest of us, who have experienced varying degrees of oppression and, you know, just being dismissed, being belittled, being demeaned. And yeah, I think that we have seen that in some of our own discussions, and that that's what I hope people will get out of this. See, I timed myself.
You still have a couple seconds on my timer.
Well, Cindy has a clarifying question.
Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
You got
Don't
to
forget to
unmute.
unmute.
Sorry. Did you notice the next paragraph that says how to encourage white men who need Uluo's book the most to engage with it? Now that's interesting that they then pinpoint who needs this book the most.
Is
white
this a
men.
question that you need me
Did
to
you
clarify?
notice that connection? How immediately following
Yes.
there's
Yes.
that comment
Yes.
of who needs it the most.
Yep.
It's interesting. Thanks.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks, Phyllis. Next on my list is Richard.
Well, it probably won't surprise many of you that I strongly disagree with just about everything in the book review. Now, to be fair, I haven't read the book, and so I can only make my comments based on the book review itself and the views of the author who's expressing his attitudes towards the book. And I think, again, it won't surprise many of you to hear that I think the very premise of this book, which is to talk about, quote, white men and white superiority, is 100% bogus to begin with. And it's because the concept of whiteness is yes, it's been around for hundreds of years, but so have other phrases that we have since moved away from and recognize that they don't represent reality. In a meeting, in-person racism meeting, I guess 2 or 3 years ago now, I quoted, and I think it's important to do this, I quoted Rabbi Michael Lerner, who said this about whiteness. And he's the editor of Tikkun. Many of you may know, a progressive Jewish journal that strongly promotes Palestinian rights. The degree to which people buy into being, quote, white, unquote, is the degree to which they are willing to forget their roots and their past. And who's willing to forget that past? Those whose past is massively painful and distorted. No wonder then that the ruling elites in the US have best succeeded in offering the designation white to those whose material existence is one of deprivation and oppression. Coming with nothing, finding a society stratified by class, living lives of pain and frustration, they are offered whiteness as a compensation and urged to contrast their fate to that of the ever more oppressed, even more oppressed Native Americans, Blacks, etc. And there are a couple other significant sentences that he mentions, but this basically turns the whole concept of what the authors and the book reviewer are talking about. just to even bring it more up to date, white is not capitalized in the New York Times. I just saw this in an article on Sidney Poitier today, whereas black is. The implication being that white is a generic group that doesn't, it's more important that we are Irish American in background, Italian American, and that our ethnic backgrounds basically trump this bogus concept of whiteness. And that to bring it to the example of New Orleans, thousands of Irish Americans died building the New Basin Canal. They were at the bottom of the totem pole. So that the concept of whiteness itself, as described by Rabbi Lerner, is bogus, and that it basically undermines the credibility of this whole article.
Thank you,
I'll have
Richard.
more to say on that later.
Do you want to get back on the list?
Back on the list, thank you.
Okay, I'll put you on the list. Cindy, did you have a clarifying question?
You're muted.
Yeah, unmute. And Louise, I see your clarifying question afterwards.
I'm interested in Richard's idea. Do you really think the idea of whiteness is not seen or not understood or not recognized as the way people categorize people?
Well, let's see, am I unmuted? Do I really think it's not understood? I think the problem is that it, like so much of the English language, the words we use obfuscate and confuse what the real situation is. I mean, there are countless examples of that. There are words that we no longer consider acceptable to use in mainstream language because they are considered offensive. I mean, in a sense, I think whiteness is that too. It basically, it quote, whitewashes a whole group of people that come from very diverse backgrounds, and to use white as a designation of a color. And there are people of Asian origin, African origin, whose skin is almost as white as most quote white American males. Whiteness obfuscates and it just does it turns arguments into kind of cat chasing your tail or dog chasing their tails arguments, because the people, yes, people use the term whiteness to describe differences between quote whites and blacks, but the concept of whiteness itself just doesn't hold water.
And Louise had a clarifying question too. And I saw Greer's hand up. I put you on the list, Greer. Hopefully that's what you wanted.
No, I wanted a clarifying question.
How many clarifying questions are allowed?
Two
clarifying questions. Yeah, and Louise, Cindy had the first, and Louise has the second. That's who I saw in order. Sorry.
Yeah, it's similar to what
And Pedro is once on the list.
Cynthia asked. So basically, Richard, we're just talking about semantics then. I mean, you say the word white. So if we said.
Sorry, Louise, is it a question?
Yeah.
Yes. If we said Russian American, whatever American, would that be better? Do you not realize that people with white faces have experienced more benefits than people with darker faces? Because that's what the argument is. It's
the issue about benefits is clear, but it's, to me, as I think it's Pablo himself has often said, is that the issue is not the color of your skin, it's who has control, who has the economic power in this country. And most of the people that have economic power are not, quote, white males. It's a 1% of America, many of whom have what are come to be thought of as white skin, but it's not the whiteness of the skin that's causing the oppression of so many people in this country. Historically, undoubtedly, there's no way you can deny that, quote, people that are now considered white were in a situation of power over people whose skin was considered darker or black. But it's not whiteness. It's not, quote, whiteness that's the mediating factor here. There are millions of, quote, white American families that are much worse off than millions of, quote, black families. Once you start getting once you start getting granular and really into what's going on in this country,
see
you'll
you,
find
Phyllis.
that the concept of whiteness as an existing 2021 power, that's where the power is with white males. It just does not hold up. It just simply doesn't.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Louise. And Greer, did you want to be on the list? I put you back on the list, but if you just wanted to ask a clarifying question.
I can be on the list.
Okay, I've got you down then. And Pedro and Phyllis. And anybody else want to jump in here, put their name on the list? Okay. Then next on the list I have is Rebecca.
Hi, good morning again. So I do think that capitalism depends on defining groups of people who are not, I guess, eligible for a good education, for good health care, for good child care for the children, in order for a ton of money to go into the hands of a few. And so I think the system of allowing a few people to have so much money and deny benefits that they have to others is really by holding people down. And so it's easy to choose people just because of the color of their skin. You can hold those people down. And then it is true that people with the same color as most of the people who have all the money, they also are being held down. But that's, if you're going to allow just a very few people to be rich and not support the community as a whole, I think that the author of this article is right, that you have to declare, if you like, a princely group or some particular group to have power over everybody else. I'm not as articulate as some of you, but that's my feeling about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. And next on the list is Bill.
The only thing that I agree with what Richard said is that whiteness is an artificial concept. I read it was invented in the Middle Ages to promote white supremacy by the Europeans. But otherwise, I disagree with everything you said. And I will point out that there is 4 possibilities in the article about how white men will react to it. And the first one captures what you said, rejection. But anyway, I'm not going to dwell on that. I put a link in the article in the chat. The Zen Education Project is a wonderful history project started by Howard Zen. And there's an article, a report that just came out that's free, and I'm going to quote from it. Reconstruction was a moment of profound hope and devastating loss. 4 million formerly enslaved people gained freedom and made strong claims on political, economic, and social equality. However, this new birth of freedom for African Americans was met with a white supremacist backlash that worked to overturn radical promise of Reconstruction and multiracial democracy in the South for a century, end quote. And I would say now the white supremacists are trying to do it all over again. They're trying to establish the white supremacist control over America, the entire country, not just the South. And I would encourage you to read this report to see how it happened during Reconstruction and to understand what's happening now better and how we can fight it. I'm going to say more, but I know my 2 minutes are almost up. So if you can put me back on the list. Thank you.
Sure. Perfect timing. Mine just went off. Okay, I will put you back on the list, Bill. And next up is Marion.
Do you have me on the list?
Glenn, no, I do not. I will put you down. Sorry.
My comment has to do with the population of the United States Census. Some time ago, I don't remember when it was, there was an article in a magazine that I read that the population of the United States consisted of a predominance of white people. And as the article went on, it said that the reason why this was so was because, and someone mentioned it a few minutes ago, that the population of the so-called white population took into consideration people who came from different European countries, and they would check the box white. So I believe this is why you have this article that to just to put it a little concisely, white men cause so much trouble. If you take into account, it's just not European so-called white people, but people who call themselves white because their skin is not dark. This isn't exactly what I wanted to say, and it's kind of convoluted, but this anthropologist said there's no such thing as a white person anyway, just like there's no such thing as a Black person. We're speaking in generalities. It's obvious Phyllis and I are different complexions, and Phyllis, I'm not singling you out to pick on you or anything like that, but it's obvious to us sitting in this group, there's a difference in our complexions. And sadly, we have people in this country who actually believe that the color of your skin actually has something to do with your intelligence. That's my 2 minutes.
But yeah.
Oh, they flew by. Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
I'll raise my hand later. You wouldn't think that, you're saying so much or so little in 2 minutes. Okay, everybody.
Do you want to get back on the list, Marion? No, you're muted. So, and no, okay. My apologies to Glenn. You are on the list. I've got Louise, Glenn, Richard, Greer, Pedro, Phyllis, Bill, and so Marion. And then Marla. I see you, Marla. Anybody else want to jump on? Okay. So again, it's Louise, Glenn, Richard, Greer, Pedro, Phyllis, Bill, and Marla. So next is Louise.
Marion, I totally agree with you. There's so much to say, so many thoughts streaming, and when you want to jump off what people have said, and then it comes to you and you don't say it. But I was actually on the list because it was something that Nancy said, and I wanted to jump on it from the article. I had actually written that down, that says anytime a white man talks about equality and justice, he is praised. And yet, and I don't have the quote for the black, but basically Black women are considered angry, loud and angry. It's like, and that is so true. And it's also leads me to this group and how I feel fighting for equality, that because of my white skin, and I am not white, I guess, Richard, my father is Egyptian, but I pass as white, so therefore I have, got the benefits from being white throughout my life. Where am I going with this? Oh, this group. Yes. So I want, we want to do good. Obviously, all of us want to do good and fight for it. And yet we're praised. And I feel guilty almost when people say, oh, that's such a good thing that you do, or such a great group. And I feel guilty because it's like, this is all I'm doing. What else can I do? I feel helpless and that I'm not really doing enough. Although I have experienced racism back in London when I lived with my father. We would have a lot of people who were darker skinned than my dad and Pakistanis coming to our house, and we would have our car keyed and you know, stuff thrown at our door. So I have experienced it, but not half as much as the daily experiences. And within this group, let's look at how many white men we have. Well, you know, we have Bill and obviously, and Richard, who knows, I won't call you white, but you know, I should imagine that you're classified as white. We're very lacking in white males. It's that's a sad truth too, not just in this group, but in the whole fight for equity and justice. That's it.
Thanks, Louise. Amen. Let's see. So Glenn is next on the list.
Yes. Well, in truth, no, there is no white man. Really, when the so-called white man ventured to other continents and they saw him, they didn't even call him a white man. They called him a red man because of how the sun made his skin look red. Now, yeah, white supremacy do exist today. It has lost some of its effectiveness, but it still exists. They had a woman who attacked the Capitol, and she got on YouTube and said she's not gonna go to jail because she is white and she has blonde hair. So it's that what Trump worked up, his supporters, that's what they are. They're white supremacists. But it's not good to come out in the open and say I'm a white supremacist. But you use the word, I want my country back. You want it in the hands of whites again, where no blacks are over you, no judges, no Supreme Court judge is black, no circuit judge is black, nobody. You don't want no supervisor over you who's black. You want your country back. You want it like it used to be. And that's what's driving the Trump supporters. The Democrats, when they voted in the 60s for civil rights, the white racists ran to the Republican Party. The Democratic Party used to be the racist party. But after the civil rights bill passed by President Johnson, they all ran to the Republican Party. Put me back on the list. Was that the bell?
Yeah, that was my timer.
And mine.
So, guess we finally got on track here, fellas, with the two of them.
Right.
Thanks, Glenn. I put you back on the list. And the next person I have on my list is Richard. Don't forget to unmute.
There we go. Okay. Well, I think what I'm hearing here is that from what many of us are saying is that the concept of whiteness, again, upon which the book is predicated and the book review, because whiteness and leading to white supremacy is the law of the land, is predicated on the concept of whiteness to begin with. And I think we're hearing that this is much more than semantics. And it gets back to what I quoted from Michael Lerner at the beginning. And that the concept of whiteness, unfortunately, plays into the hands of so-called white supremacists and white nationalists for the very reason that Glenn was talking about, in that it plays into the idea that we as a group of, quote, white men are losing, quote, our country, and that we have every right to storm the gates at the Capitol building to do it. So I think it is important to define our terms and to recognize that whiteness as a concept to upon which to say that white supremacy is the law of the land just is not the case. I mean, you can get so granular about this in the year 2022 about what's happening in this country that the Oath Keepers are now under, they have been charged with sedition, which is a very serious charge. To say that white folks are getting off where quote, blacks are not when it comes to criminal activity is just, again, it's a false concept. Justice is being done. New York City now again has an African-American mayor who is hardly progressive in his approach to public safety. We now have, you know, it's not belabor it, but we've got many examples of non-quote white European American men in significant aspects of power. It's just not clear. It's not correct to say that white supremacy is the law of the land.
Oops. Thank you, Richard. Anybody else here? I see. Oh, Bill, you have a clarifying question? Don't forget to unmute.
Pose that in this question.
There
Are
you go.
you aware that Black men are significantly more likely to be incarcerated than white men?
I'm aware of it. I'm also aware that in most Americans, unfortunately, in most American cities, that Black crime is disproportionate to most other American crime. That's going to be a very provocative thing to say, but there's no other way to say it. New Orleans is unfortunately a prime example.
Okay. Greer is next on my list.
Louise has two fingers up.
Oh, sorry, Louise. Go ahead.
So just to, you believe justice is done then? You believe justice prevails in our society? Richard?
Clarifying.
Is that a clarifying question?
I think Richard's frozen because he's not moving on my screen.
That's a good way to
I
get
mean,
out
may
of it.
have lost him.
Okay.
I'm not. What time is it? He said he had to get off.
Yeah, it's
He had to get off
10:55.
at 11. So he may have just taken that opportunity to leave, I think. Yeah, and he's gone. So Greer's next on my list.
Oh, yeah, okay, here I am. The whiteness is not the driving force behind what's happening, but it's the concept and the symbol of the solidarity that people who push their agenda want to use. To say that white supremacy isn't the law of the land, I'm just going to say it, that's ridiculous. Because systemically, that's what's driving where people are and how they fall in the world, and how people have more advantages than other people. Semantics all out the window. At the end of the day, the truth is the truth. And even, I think, I forgot who said it. Louise said it. Her father's Egyptian. So she's benefited from whiteness because people from Egypt are considered white. I was reading an article where a man who was obviously, he looked what we would consider Black in America.
Cindy.
And what he did was he had to fight to get white off of his papers when he became a citizen. So this is a systemic issue. To say it's not, to say there's fairness, to say there's no white supremacy going on, by the mere fact that you have to fight to be something else because somebody deems that you're going to be white because you come from Egypt, and you have to go and fight that, that says a hell of a lot. White supremacy exists, and anybody who says it doesn't is insane. That's it.
Good timing, Greer.
Can I ask a clarifying question of Louise?
Guess so. You know the rules better than me, fellas.
You're making up rules.
Louise, does your white passing come from your Egyptian father?
My white what?
You said you could pass as white.
Yeah, my skin. Basically,
Does that come from your Egyptian father? Or
Well,
is he darker skinned?
my Irish mother, my mixed with a light-skinned Egyptian, yeah, makes me pretty light-skinned.
Thank you.
Is that
That's
answer?
it. Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. I had a glimpse of Cindy's camera and it looked like she was holding up a finger. Were you, or did I misunderstand? You're on mute, so I just shake your head yes or no, I guess. No, okay. So next on the list is Pedro.
Well, I'm disappointed Richard's not here. But anyhow, I'll state my comments regardless. Number one, capitalism, as the article indicates, it creates this great wealth divide through really in the history of exploitation of labor, whether it was through slavery, whether it was through the exploitation of labor itself, but it does so in a disproportionate way that affects people of color at a greater rate than whites. That's just an empirical fact that can be documented. And I think also when I think of white privilege, as I'm trying to struggle to understand it in its full context, I think of layers of discrimination, right? So there's layers that come from race, there's layers that come from sexual orientation, if I'm gay, there's some that come from socioeconomic class if I'm poor. And by white privilege, it just means I don't have to worry about the race part of it. So I have that advantage over other people. That's where the privilege comes from. And I think there's black privilege if you're heterosexual. I think Glenn has black privilege over other African Americans that are gay. I mean, that's just kind of the angst that people get in society from race is something that reduces life expectancy. It's a greater stress than someone that is white does not have to endure. This is being put out there in science I've mentioned her name before, Dr. Arlene Geronimus, about how African Americans and people that are facing abject poverty as well, increasingly are experiencing shorter lifespans due to the stresses that come with those forms of oppression, those layers of oppression that whites certainly can have at the economic level. So I think it conflates the idea that just because there's poor whites means that they're not subject to the same deal. So thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Phyllis, I have you next on the list. Greer, you want to get on the list?
Cindy has a clarifying question.
Yes, I want to get on the list.
Okay. And Cindy, if you want to ask your clarifying question, I see your finger too, Cheryl.
How many people are on the list?
We've got Phyllis, Bill, Marla, Glenn, Greer, Cheryl, and we probably should maybe cut it off there. So, who had the clarifying question? Cindy. Unmute.
Trying to figure out a way to make it into a. There we go. Is it off now?
Yeah, I
It's
can
hard to
hear you.
I think historically, do you agree that over time, who's white changes? My identity is really not Irish, but I look Irish. And I think 100 years ago, I would have been discriminated against because of looking Irish. And they were the out guys for a long time. They did important work, but they were discriminated against very widely. Do you agree that that can change over time?
Yeah, I think that there's sub levels of discrimination within the race of being white, if that's the question.
Yeah.
So yeah, but those sub races are still not at the same level or the same
Absolutely.
quality of the others. So yeah, that's, I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Thank you. That's next is Phyllis.
Yeah, I'm sorry Richard's gone too, because I think he's completely wrong in his opinions about this, and he's kind of in denial and doesn't want to accept the responsibility and accountability of white manhood, but that's just me. I got really behind on my Daily Show watching in November and December, so I've been going backwards. And one of the guests, which is really weird when he talks about things that happened a long time ago, one of the guests he had was Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who, good and bad. He, at one point, Gavin Newsom started to say like that he had built himself up and worked himself up by himself, and he started to say, no inheritance, and then he kind of stopped himself. And I think he realized that he was going to sound like an idiot as a white man saying that he had no help or support or privilege. And I just want to say the paragraph that starts, I'm going to read the whole paragraph, I think. The end of patriarchy, white supremacy, and capitalism is a necessary but not sufficient condition to dealing with the multiple cascading ecological crises we face. Not only rapid climate destabilization, but also soil erosion and degradation, chemical contamination of land and water, and species extinction, which does not exclude human extinction, I would add. The human future will be defined by fewer and less, fewer people consuming much less, either because we plan for it or because the ecosphere imposes it. I think this article, this review, and I have the book and haven't finished it, that it really helped tie all the different parts of what we're facing right now together with white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, the idea that, who are the men who are trying, they're putting themselves in outer space, 3 white men. There's problems to solve on the earth that their money could be contributing to, but they get themselves in their rocket fueled phallic symbols and head up to space to feel like big men. They disgust me, all 3 of them, and anybody who supports them. And so I heard the timer, but yeah, I just want to say Trump was a big mediocre white guy. And I would also add that so is Joe Biden.
Thanks, Phyllis.
Thanks.
Bill is next.
Yes, I agree with what Phyllis said. And to be clear, when I said that whiteness was invented in the Middle Ages, it's very real now. And but I also want to say capitalism is sometimes blamed, and unregulated capitalism is definitely a culprit. But the underlying premise motivation is greed. It's a greed on the part of the wealthy to control all the things themselves. And greed is very active. It's a predominant American concept. And in the Scandinavian countries, where Europe was where white supremacy started, they've kind of moved a little past that. I was reading an article about why Denmark in the Scandinavian countries always score highest on the happiness test. That's because of expectation. In the Scandinavian countries, greed is looked down on, overt greed at least. I'm sure it's subtle. Anyway, the other point I wanted to make, I looked it up, and 31% of Americans are white men. And when you limit who can contribute to society to white men, you're shortchanging your country, because you're eliminating 70% of the brain power, 70% of the ideas from making this a better world. And it's not that 31%, because white men who appear to be working class are also discriminated against when it comes to positions of power. Anyway, I agree with the article. I thought it was a good discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And let's see, next on my list is Marla.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed that Richard's gone also.
He's back.
I think, hey, Richard, he's back. Okay. I just wanted to put out there again that whiteness as a concept, it's not about biology, it's about ideology. And I think that we kind of continue to slide down this rabbit hole of looking white or acting white or whatever, what have you, but it's an ideology. It is not about biology, right? And the other thing that struck me about the article that I think it just made me personally go, oof, is the portion where she says, or where he says, he quotes the author of the book, "Nobody is more pessimistic about white men than white men." And the fact that the white man is 100% okay with where they are and have a lot, just tremendous resistance to change and personal growth. Growth individually is what I'm speaking to, within their own relationships with other people, with how they view other people who may look different from them and what another person's experience is, and absolutely feeling that their experience is the same as everybody else's experience. And the emphasis again on the cluelessness. And I will say personally, I have experienced this struggle within my own interpersonal relationships, far and wide, actually, with white men. So, the challenge is still there, but, you can lead the horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. So continue to plug away and, and just do our thing here. So that's all I have. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Marla. Next on the list is Glenn.
I'm gonna wait for the wrap up because we're running out of time.
Okay. Greer.
I put in a link in the chat, but I'm sort of piggybacking off of Pedro. I think he said that it affects us biologically, white supremacy. I put a link in for unnatural causes. Inequality is making us sick. And I saw the series. It's a series of how racism, white supremacy, affects us biologically. And one of the things that they showed was that a college-educated Black woman has more of a chance of having a premature baby than a high school educated white woman. Because when she experiences racism and microaggression, her baby does also. We're talking about two women who have no maladies, no known health histories, no familial issues with carrying babies to term. A white woman with a high school education has a better chance of having a healthy child than a Black woman with a college degree. That's significant. Again, white is a symbol and a concept that is backed by systemic agendas to hold people down. It's not the whiteness of the skin, it's the system that perpetuates whiteness, and it caters to whiteness, and everybody else has to suffer. That's it.
Thanks, Greer. And last on the list, I have Cheryl.
This can also be my last statement. You know, I don't have to be included again. I really do disagree with Richard, and I hope that Richard is here to hear me, because I wonder if you ever consider that you might be wrong, that what you're reading isn't true, and that somehow that has happened. And I guess I'm still I'm resonating on listening to the part about housekeepers, because I've been a housekeeper as well as I'm a massage therapist. And when I became a housekeeper after Katrina, people hired me into their homes because I was white, and made comments about it, which sickened my stomach. And I was paid very well. I was paid $25 an hour, which was a great rate. I mean, they paid exactly what I wanted. And I could feel the racism in all of that. And being a massage therapist, doing house calls, I get treated as a servant. And it really gives me such a very different view of everything. The bathrooms I'm told to use, the way that I'm treated immediately. Same people that would come to my office when I came to their house, they gave me separate entrances to use, and just found it very interesting. And I questioned that ward because also of doing some caretaking, where there were many people of different color that worked with me, but I was hired simply because at the time the person was kind of losing their mind and they wanted a white, they were an older woman and they wanted someone white, but I did work with a really diverse staff, which I really enjoyed. But maybe that ward at that hospital is kept like that because that's a racist ward, and they have to hide the fact that those people are working with those people and they are keeping other people out because those people, you know, that maybe the hospital supports racism or whatever that place is. And I did have questions. How do we change this? And I answered myself with, we all need to make sure we use our financial abilities to shop, buy, support things that do not have white supremacists at the top of it, to try to change this situation and give more power to others. Thank you for today.
Thank you, Cheryl. So that was the end of the list. It is 11:15, 16 by my clock here. So we're going to do the wrap up. And I believe the only person that didn't speak today is Lynn and Jenny and Marla.
Marva.
No, Marva. Yeah, I meant to say Marva. Sorry.
Did Nora speak?
Oh, and Nora. Sorry. Yes. So Nora. So it's Jenny, Nora, Lynn, and Marva are the four that didn't speak. Thank you, Phyllis. So why don't we start with Jenny?
Yeah, I've had a couple of thoughts. One, I'm glad Richard's here. And Richard, while you were speaking, I was thinking of, and I put the link in the chat, a workshop I went to that the city of Austin sponsored, I don't know, several years ago on, I don't know if it was Undoing Racism. I don't remember the title. Glenn Singleton was the trainer. And at one point they had us go through the article, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, which lists all sorts of things. Let me just read you. I'm just going to read three quickly. I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. I do not have to educate my children to be aware of systemic racism for their own daily physical protection. Whether I use checks, credit cards, or cash, I can count on my skin color not to work against the appearance of financial reliability. And then everyone would rate themselves from a 0 to a 5. And then we stood in a line from those that had the highest score to those that had the lowest score, lower scoring indicating those things do not apply to you. Absolutely, without exception, the white people were in front and the Black people were in back. And it was so, so graphic. And these were leaders in a lot of them were both Black and white leaders in the city of Austin. So it was so graphic and so dramatic. So I disagree with what you said, Richard. And that's it. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Jenny. Let's see. So what about, let's go to Marva next.
Good article, Michelle. Excellent article. It gave rise to a stimulating discussion. I enjoyed hearing everybody's views, and including Richard. I got food for thought, and in addition to life experiences since that I went through, and I refuse to get on the list because stress increases my stuttering, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to share my life experiences. Thank you for a good discussion.
Thank you, Marva. I'm sorry you don't feel comfortable or at this point with the being able to participate at the level you're used to. So I enjoy hearing your viewpoints for sure. So, Lynn, would you like to go next?
Thank you. I want to buy this book. The article necessarily is reduced to generalities and abstractions, but the review said that she had lots of stories to illustrate her points, and so I would like to read that. And if I'm in town in May, I hope to come to this book club that Nora has mentioned in the chat. Now that is an exciting possibility. I love book clubs, but not everybody wants to read about racism. So that would be very worthwhile. I liked one of the sentences in the article. I liked the whole article. But the sentence that I focused on was, even if I haven't been an active agent of evil, I am responsible for my part in changing the social norms. And this is also the answer to people who said, my ancestors didn't have slaves. I don't have to do anything. I am not responsible. And certainly I will not pay reparations. If we want a good country, we will all work to change the way things are and make them better. Thank you, everyone. It was a good discussion. And thank you, Michelle, for organizing the discussion and moderating. Very worthwhile.
Thanks, Lynn. I appreciate that. And then last is Nora. I have.
Yeah, I was struck by one of the paragraphs in the article about the rewarding of white male mediocrity not only limits the drive and imagination of white men, it also requires forced limitations on the success of women and people of color in order to deliver on the promise white male supremacy. White male mediocrity harms us. And it just kind of reminded me of being in the public schools and kind of that trickling down of mediocrity. If you haven't spent much time in public schools, maybe your experience is different than mine, but it can be a very mind-numbing, dead environment where the kids are not challenging ideas, not certainly not critically thinking. And so that's how we perpetuate the whole culture. And yes, the meetup platform was mentioned in the board meeting before this meeting. And so if you'd like to try that, the meetup form, you're welcome to join us in May when we, after reading the book and discussing it at our May meeting. And so you just go to the meetup.com website and look for the book club, which is called Colors Book Club, and we'd be happy to have you. That's all.
Thank you, Nora. And I have gone to a couple of those, by the way. So, that's how I got to know Nora. And so it is a good discussion. So, and kind of would be the opposite of this. It's Austin based, but we would love to have, I know Nora would love to have other outside voices. So that would be cool if you want to cross reference anyway. So now we'll go to the regular wrap up. Everybody gets a minute who's already spoken in the meeting. So, I'm going to go again by my screen here. Hopefully I can keep up with that. It's Greer I see first. So Greer, would you like to wrap up?
Like I said, this article really spoke to me, really got me thinking. I enjoyed everyone's comment. And to be honest, we don't all have to agree, because I don't think we're here to sway people, but in all honesty, you have to hear what you don't like in order to learn. And you also have to realize you're not going to change everybody. And if it was a kumbaya session all the time, we get nothing out of it, because we already think alike. This is really giving me food for thought. Thank you for picking this article.
Thank you, Greer. Thank you. Next I see on my screen is Phyllis.
Well, I just want to say that I think the problems facing our country right now really have to do with the inherent racism and white supremacy and patriarchy of this culture, and the GOP in general, Fox News, white supremacy, and the insurrectionists are all examples of that terrible road that we could end up going down to indescribable suffering for everyone in this country. And I think we have to do everything we can to resist those forces. And when you think of Fox News, the anchors, you think of all these white guys and just making crap up every day. And it's disgusting to me that people still follow it and believe it. And that also is playing into the health field as well. That's becoming something people don't trust anymore. So thank you very much, Michelle. This has inspired me to finish reading the book.
Me too. Makes me put it back on my list for sure. Thanks, Phyllis. And next I think is Nancy.
Thank you, Michelle. This was a very bold choice. It really was. And I'm looking forward to more bold choices, because that's how we are going to, as Greer said, we don't have to agree. But if you don't listen to unpopular opinions that differ from yours, you will never grow. Okay, you will never learn and you won't grow. But I do want to say this. I want to say this country was founded by rich, white, heterosexual Christian men. And if you were not part of that demographic, you didn't matter. You didn't count. You didn't have a say. You didn't have anything to do. We are not talking to you. This is who matters in this country, and it still matters today. And I want to say, when I read that paragraph to you in the beginning, I circled clueless, and next to it, I wrote Harvey.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy, and appreciate your bold comments too. Let's see. Next on my screen is Marion.
I would like to thank you, Michelle, for this very provocative argument. It's something that all of us, I wish we had 15 more people. I think there are 15 of us here. Oh, there were 15 times 15 more people to have been here, if not to have participated in the discussion, but to at least listen to the comments from everyone. And I thought that everyone that had something to say said something very, very relevant and very important. And not to be a pessimist, but there are people who believe in a heaven and a hell. And I told a friend of mine, I think this past Wednesday or Thursday, I think we're in hell and we don't know it. So I'll end on that note.
Thank you, Marion. Next is Bill.
I agreed with Greer, as I always do, that white is an ideology and not biology. It's a concept that was manufactured to promote greed and racism. But I do disagree with her. I think it's great that we have different viewpoints, but I learn a lot from people who I agree with. In fact, I learn more from people I agree with in this group than people I disagree with, but I welcome the disagreements. And Greer is one of the people that I learn a lot from, and I appreciate that. Mediocre is the best evidence of mediocre is the former president. And the fact that he is worshipped by so many people who worship his mediocrity.
Thanks, Bill. Pedro, I have you next on my screen.
Okay, I wanted to first just express my appreciation and solidarity with Marva for her courage, and I always really am always very interested in the messages that you share. Also, I wanted to say, I think ideology, Marla's deal, ideology, it trumps biology, but it also, I think, trumps race too. The way we think and can just deconstruct oppression is the priority, regardless of all of this. And of course, having white privilege, kind of taints my view there. But also, what Gigi said about white privilege, the psychic pain that people get from racism creates an autonomic response. An autonomic is an automatic response in your body that creates constriction of blood supply, that then creates the underweight babies and the premature births. So that's the biology behind that deal. Thanks. Sorry to go over the 1 minute.
No worries. Let's see. Marla, I've got you next on the screen here.
Don't have much more to say, except I'm very grateful for the group and wonderful article choice. My 2022 energy will continue to follow what Greer mentioned about, hearing opposing viewpoints and not completely going into a zone and just not hearing when somebody starts out that I completely disagree with. I'm trying to do a little more circling back within and coming from a place of more curiosity and an interest than anger and irritation. So This group helps with that tremendously as well. And again, also in my interpersonal relationships. So thank you all. Have a great week.
Thank you, Marla. I agree. Let's see. Next is Glenn. Don't forget to unmute, Glenn, if you're there.
I was born in the Jim Crow South. And it was so bad that at the age of 4 years old, I knew racism and feared racism at the age of 4. So you know it had to be pretty thick for a 4-year-old child who's still in their childhood to see racism and understand it. And to the extent that he could at that age, and fear it. But I don't fear it today. And I see the big difference in today. You know, we're still trying to form a more perfect human. And the future, I don't see the future as dismal as some of my African American associates on this line. I don't see it as dismal as they see, or that the forces of racism is going to win. I guess I can leave on that note.
Thanks, Glenn. Rebecca?
Okay, wonderful discussion, wonderful leadership in this group. I just want to stress one more thing. I believe that US white supremacists care more about selling weapons in the Middle East than they do about helping our children have a good upbringing, having enough food, healthcare, and especially childcare. And that really illustrates the problem about white supremacy and the support of these very wealthy Americans. So thanks for the discussion. Thanks for the group. Have a good week. Bye.
Thanks, Rebecca. Cheryl?
I think I'm complete. Thank you for such a great conversation, everyone. Have a good week.
Thanks, Cheryl. You too. Cindy, and I think, you didn't speak. I think you made a couple of clarifying comments, and I don't think you ever spoke. So if you'd like 2 minutes, go ahead.
Thank you. Bill pointed that out to me, but I'm happy with where we were. But a couple of small points that I noticed. Way back in the beginning, Lynn said something about working toward making this a good country. And I think for all of us, maybe that's the goal. The question is, what do we mean by good country? Where people listen to each other, respect the other person's opinion, and whether there's a broad range of maybe competing or slightly competing modifications of the goals. We can work together toward making a good country without being on the exact same path. I thought what Greer said about this was a good article for food for thought, and I agree. I think all of us have ideas about what we want to do as our lives continue. Hopefully we can work toward the goals that we might share. A point that I disagree with, I don't remember who, talked about how our schools are so mediocre. And sadly, that may be true of a lot of schools. But I will also say, having been in the school system for many, many years, if the parents demand excellence among teachers, among practices, teaching practices, and also backgrounds of teachers, that they're educated, that they're open-minded, etc. If parents demand it, it'll happen. And so when schools are mediocre, there's a problem. And there's a problem not only with the school itself, but with the people that are supporting it. So becoming an outspoken supporter of whatever your main ideas are is really essential. Maybe that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Let's see, Louise.
I agree with Greer as well about having to be uncomfortable in order to grow. That's totally true. And I just wanted to mention, if everyone is okay with it, and if Marva feels okay with it, I would very much like to give her an extra time, because to be silenced in this group, which is all about speaking your mind, seems like not good. So if everyone is on board, I'd be very happy to give her, 3 minutes instead of 2 minutes for each thing. I don't know, Marva, is that something that you would like? I don't know.
I'm enrolling in speech therapy and emotional support. And I'm going to seek a therapist. Thank you for all your concerns.
If I can add, I was thinking, Marva, during like our discussions going forward, that we just wouldn't time you at all. And so you wouldn't even feel the pressure of something's going to go off. You could just, because you don't go over normally anyway, you keep yourself succinct. So
I'm sorry to miss. I had a good one today, sharing my experience, but I don't think I could have gotten through it before the bell.
Okay.
I just want to say, Marva, the current president of the United States has some speech difficulties, but that didn't stop him. So we love to hear your thoughts, and we would love to hear your thoughts in a way that accommodates your participation and comfort.
Thank you.
Best wishes with your therapy too. So.
And all in favor of giving you unlimited time, if you do choose to speak to us, please raise your hand so she can see our support.
Yeah, definitely. Nobody should be silenced in this group.
Greer says no. Just kidding. Her hand is up.
Let's see, last but not least, since he rejoined the group, Richard, would you like to give your parting comments here?
I apologize for being disconnected. It turns out I was running on a battery and I thought my power cord was plugged in, but it wasn't. So I'm sorry about that. It was a good discussion. Through these 28 odd years of racism, I think now I kind of look at Marion and Glenn as my touchstones of whether I'm kind of on the right track with my opinions and in terms of where racism is going in general. And I think their views today kind of reinforce mine in many ways. And my intent here is not to provoke or to get on the wrong side of folks. And I truly believe that we're closer on a lot of this than it might appear. Clearly, racism is a significant problem in today's society. Clearly, in my mind, it is not, quote, the white supremacy that is the issue, because most, quote, white European origin men do not consider themselves to be white supremacists. It just isn't the case. The last important thing is that it's important in this group to avoid personal attacks. I'm afraid that one person who called me clueless by the name that I don't use on this group, that came perilously close to a personal attack. And I know you're a new moderator at this, but one of the reasons this group succeeds is because we don't get personal with each other, regardless of how strongly we may disagree. So please, when we hear the words being called clueless, let's call that person out right away, because this group works because we avoid personal attacks as strongly as opposed as our views might seem to be. This was a good discussion, and I did get a lot out of it.
I agree.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you also for everybody's, voices of support of my moderation here. So it says I'm getting more used to this each time I do it. And yes, I would also say that we need to be reminded we don't want this to become a personal attack, place of personal attacks. We're supposed to be able to share our viewpoints here and not feel personally attacked by anybody. So apologies that my apologies that I did not say anything, but and the discussion, of course, led me in many directions here, and it's hard as a moderator to also just really tune in as I'm trying to keep track of who's been speaking and all that. So, I mean, I have various comments I could definitely have. I mean, I agreed with much of what was said here today, and I do want to point out for sure there are a lot of people put things in the comments today. It links to various things that might interest everybody, myself included. I just finished reading a book called High Conflict by Amanda Ripley, and I put a link to the book in there. I found it very much relates to this group and how we handle the group, and talking about. I'm trying to remember who it was. Phyllis and Greer both made comments earlier that made me think of this book as far as how we conduct discussions. It's all about getting ourselves out of what the author terms high conflict, and that's where we are going. We are a highly polarized country right now, and she basically did a deep dive into why we're there and how we got here, and her own research on the topic and talking to multiple people about it, and also recording and reiterating some of the high conflict situations she came across. It was very eye-opening and interesting, and I highly recommend it to everybody here to take a look at it at least. I think it had a lot of relevant things to say about where we are in society right now. So again, it's High Conflict by Amanda Ripley. And another book that I put up in there, a link to another author, is Jonathan Metzel, for anybody who may or may not be familiar with him. He's a white guy, but one of his best-selling books is called Dying of Whiteness. And he has some interesting commentary there about how I think the commentary was made and has been made many times by Pedro about Arlene Geronimus's research into the weathering factor for people of color and how the microaggressions and everyday dealing with racism, how that plays into deteriorating their health over time. And Jonathan Metzel points out in his research and his writings about how that has affected white people. And I find that an interesting contrast too. So he literally, the title of the book is Dying of Whiteness, and that's kind of his thesis there, and how he's found that to be. So thank you everybody for agreeing to. I knew this was going to be kind of a hot button issue. That's why I kind of, at the beginning of my commentary, said that I was kind of like, I felt like I was walking on eggshells to suggest this as a topic discussion, and I knew it was going to bring up some kind of heated. I don't want to say debate because I don't really think but commentary. So, thank you for sticking with it, reading it, and I think we had a great discussion. So.